Yep.
One, and we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Polygon Forest podcast. We are now a year into this thing. Happy birthday, Chris.
Happy birthday, Vin. How is your 1 year today, you big boy?
Pretty good. I mean, looking at the subscribers, like we've got 360, so we've literally, like we spoke about this in the pre-show, but 300, like we've literally gotten one subscriber a day for every day that we've been doing the podcast.
Been putting out content,
which is kind of cool. I like this. I like that sort of metric. But yeah, happy birthday to us. But anyway, as always, I'm joined as ever by Christopher Jarvis, the indie developer.
Hello.
And I am Ubisoft concept artist Vin Hill. And today we are going to be talking about a few different things. As you can tell by the thumbnail, we're going to be talking about funding our indie games, and how we're going to sort of go around that. Also, there's a couple of news bits around Activision Blizzard, as well as PlayStation. I've got some stuff going on. We're going to mention that. And maybe a couple of other little things, especially what we've been playing this week, if anything at all, because Chris is a very busy boy. Yeah. So, Chris, what do you want to start with? So
I guess the major news for me is that I'm now in a position with my game and my work life to start focusing on turning it into a full-time endeavor, and I'm now looking into funding different revenue streams, and to sort of change my life from having a day job and have the indie game stuff on the side to going full-time. And there's a few reasons as to why this has all happened now. It's both personal work stuff and things like the interest rates and budgeting and working out what I can afford and what I can't afford. And now, so strangely, even though everything's really expensive and difficult, that is now a good time to sort of change things up, because I've got a number, I've got things in place, the game's come to a certain point, and now is a good time to look to taking this thing full time.
Cool.
Full time indie dev.
So I mean, you've obviously been thinking about this a lot more than I have recently, for various reasons. But how are you planning to sort of go around this? And there's so much to unpack here, I guess. What's the sort of journey been so far? Where you up to, and what you sort of prepared for, I guess.
So the journey so far has been, I just started to make a little indie game 2 years ago because it was in lockdown. I had some cash. I was in a flat all by myself because it was in lockdown, and I just thought, what do I want to do with my life? And I want to make video games. But I didn't know how to code. So these last couple of years, I've been learning how to code. So making my first game. I never intended for my first game to sort of get this far. To be honest, again, I was naive. I thought I'd be done by now. But so the journey was learning Unity and coding, making my little indie game, and now fast forward 2 and a bit years.
Yeah.
And I'm in a situation where I've got a playable. I'm in production basically. So I've tested the things I needed to test to see whether or not is this a game that I can make. Yes or no. Yes. Funding wasn't even a factor then. I was just working full time, making a game on the side. I'm just gonna make a game on the side.
Yeah.
And now I'm in this situation where I've got the gear, I've got the standing desk, so I can work longer. I've got the PC that can actually help me make a game. I've now got the skills and experience to actually make a video game with code as well as the art side of things. And I've got a playable demo. So money hasn't come into it up until now. Now I'm looking at funding sources. And so I've been doing a lot of research, and for me, what I found as a solo indie dev that's trying to transition, I don't have anyone that I need to think about except for myself. And so I'm going to do a few things, and I'm going to try and get as many revenue streams as I possibly can. So the major one is looking at grants. So I'm based in the UK, so there are some UK-based grants. There are also some international grants that I can apply for. So they're going to be my first point of call. Second to that, I'm going to look at other revenue streams. So I'm setting up a Patreon so people can support me on a monthly basis, and gain a community. I'm going to set up other things like a Discord so that I can be in touch with the community. I'm gonna do more YouTube videos on my channel. Again, another place that I can gain traction. And I'm going to do an Indiegogo as well.
Right.
So Indiegogo is a platform similar to Kickstarter. Most people will have heard of Kickstarter, but not many people that aren't indie game devs would have heard of Indiegogo. It's not as big as Kickstarter, but the major difference, and the reason why it's good for me in my situation, is that you get to take the money that's pledged despite whether or not you actually reach your funding goal.
Right.
And the reason why that's important for me is that I've got a funding goal in mind that will mean, can I take this full time for a year? Yes or no? So my major first milestone is get enough money to be able to fund myself to make the game by myself for a year. And so that will be my target for the Indiegogo. At the same time, I'll be applying for grants. If I get a grant, that's going to help. That's going to be great. If I get more than what my target fund is, which is possible, then I've got things I can do to spend that money on. So it will help me secure a longer period of dev time. And then it will get to the point where I can start spending money on marketing to get the name out there of Focus Fine, the indie game I'm working on. And then lastly, if I get loads and loads of money, I can bring on someone to do like the sound, or I can bring on a well-known voice actor to run the lines. And so I've got 3 different outcomes depending on how much money I get. So depending on if it's a solo dev, I bring on 1 person or I bring on 2 people.
Yeah.
There is a 4th option, which is I don't get enough funding to support myself for a year, in which case I will use that money to use for marketing. So I'll still have to do my full-time job and do the indie game on evenings and weekends.
Right.
But if I don't get enough funding to take myself full-time, the money that I do get from any campaigns or any Patreon or any grants will be going into making the visibility higher. So more people are interested, more people will be wish listing. So my figures look better. So I look more attractive and more legitimate to more investors. So the more successful you are, the more investors want to jump on board. So at the moment I'm on a high risk because I've got low visibility.
I guess because we spoke about this briefly in the pre-show, but the best thing about all of this is that you're keeping a level head about it all, and you're not just quitting your day job or anything and like, I'm going to be a full-time indie dev or whatever. Like that's the important. That's the biggest caveat that I want to sort of give. Like if anyone's watching this after the fact, like if you're starting your own indie game, don't do that. Like don't just quit your job and try and do this full-time. That's insane.
Also don't devalue yourself either. Don't go to the minimum amount. Like what can I get away with if I'm on just eating bread all the time, or chicken nuggets, or if I sell my car? Don't go for the bare minimum. Go for what you can comfortably do, because you're not going to be able to budget accurately. I don't know anyone that can budget accurately in indie games.
Yeah, it's hard, man.
And you've got to have a little leeway as well, like the months it would take you to try and find a job if all else fails. So that's why the money I've got is going to be 12 months for development time, in which case I can make a big chunk of dent in production of the game.
Right.
And then it's actually the actual number I've got in mind will also mean like a month and a half to 2 months worth of, I need to find another job, like searching for jobs
just
and
in
interviewing.
case. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the good thing about this is that even in all the worst case scenarios, like if you don't get the funding and you can't get a grant or all of this sort of stuff, if you're just carrying on as normal and you just gained an extra bit of cash for, as you said, just to pump into marketing, then at least you're gaining out of that. So it's as you say, it's sort of a no lose situation in that respect. So as long as you don't leave your day job, then it's more power to you, man.
Exactly.
There's nothing wrong with any of this.
Yeah, I mean, there is some people that would say, if I was doing well in a certain career in my day job and it was pointing me down a direction that was going to lead on to more success, more financial stability.
You mean climbing the ladder of that career that you're in?
Yeah.
Right.
So that I will be giving that up if I get funding for a year and then I fail and I don't do well. The game doesn't get made for some reason.
Sure. But the question is do you want to climb that ladder anyway? And if
exactly.
you do, is it? I mean, because I know this is a hard sort of discussion to have, especially from someone in my position where I'm obviously in a a position of privilege where I've got the job that I love already, and it's easy for me to sort of look down upon the minions, as it were. Like, not like I'm obviously like joking about that, but it's easy for me to say to someone else like, it's more important that you find a job that you love than it is like to try and climb like the financial ladder. That's obviously a lot harder said than done, especially if you've got other responsibilities that do require you to have like a steady income and all that sort of stuff. I totally respect and understand that. But if there is a window anywhere that you could sort of attack, which is if you like on your side hustle, like in your case being an indie developer, if there's any like opportunity for you to be able to progress forward and you had to make the decision between progressing in extra cash that you could get from climbing the ladder of a job that you don't really love that much. Not like you in particular, Chris. Like I don't think we've ever had a conversation of how much you actually love your day job. You might,
Nothing wrong with it. It's really good. The people are great. Manager's great. Nothing wrong with it whatsoever.
There you go. So like you fall into a good slot on that. Whereas there's other people that like absolutely hate their jobs, and they're like, but I need to climb the ladder to earn more money, or I can like go this other route of doing the thing that I love and try and get an income from that. But it's going to take a lot longer. I'm not going to be like as stable and stuff. But I would argue that is the more important route to take because you'll be much happier for it. Again, like I understand them from the point of privilege right now, because I'm already outside of that bubble. It's like you see the same thing with people that know languages, right? And they say, "Oh, just learn that language. It's easy. You'll pick it up." When people say stuff like that, and you just want to shake them, stuff like that. It's just like you have no idea, man. Like the people that haven't learned a language since they were kids. It's a very similar thing. So I understand like it's frustrating that I would like even suggest something like that, but I do applaud you for trying to go after that, a happier job rather than the more stable one for a lot of the time.
Yeah. And the other thing is as well, it's like the failing side of things sounds quite daunting, and it is. It's huge consequences. I've got a mortgage, I've got a kids to support, so I've got these.
I mean, you can't fail though. That's the thing. Like that's the thing about this situation. You can't, because you're not inherently like losing anything. You're only like setting yourself up to make gains, and that's it. Like I said, like if you don't quit your day job, worst thing that could happen is that the game doesn't get funded. You don't get any grants. You don't get any investors. You don't get any marketing. You don't get any additional gamers like that are looking at your project. That's the worst case scenario. That is literally no different to what you've got right now, right?
Yeah.
So like
worst case scenario is that my game it gets made a little bit more, except it's just at a shorter, smaller rate than I would like, and it's just more frustrating. Yeah. The reason being, I've been through, but like leaving a full-time stable job is really daunting prospect for a lot of people, and it was for me years ago. What's happened to me in my life is that I've been through a situation where I've been made redundant. I've been fired from jobs.
Right.
I've applied for what I've said to myself and other people is my dream job, which wasn't. It turned out that I was just missold this lie, and I tricked myself into thinking if I climb the corporate ladder I'll be happy, and it did not work out, and I ended up being fired. Long story, but the point is I am very employable, so I've got a lot of skills, and I know that I can find a job not really easily, but I know I can find a job within a certain amount of time frame because I've had to unfortunately do it several times in my life now.
Sure. Yeah.
So the worst case scenario is that I'm just in a situation that I'm actually got practice at, and I'm well versed in it, and that's not a stressful prospect to me anymore because I've been through it. I know that the job market is quite buoyant, and I know I'm employable for a certain amount of jobs. So that is now not even. I'm at this point now where that's not even a pull or push factor. It's just not on the table. It's like that's insignificant to me. Like if I had to go and start a new job. I've done it so many times now in my career that it's just not even a thing. But a lot of people, that's a fear. And I understand that because some people, like my manager's been in his job for like 20 years. He doesn't want to leave.
Yeah.
And, that's great for him. He's enjoying himself as well. So, but yeah, for me, that's one of those things where I might not have done this earlier. If I hadn't have been fired and if I hadn't been made redundant and if I didn't have to find new jobs, which is a scary prospect and stressful and time consuming, and especially if you've got a partner that gets worried and stressed out about that as well, that could be a huge reason why people wouldn't do it. So you've got to make sure it's the right decision. I'm not trying to make it sound like it's for everyone, because it is stressful and
sure
consequences.
It is one of those strange things though. Like the older you get, like the more you're sort of you're on the pursuit of happiness, like sort of thing, where you're like money, like yeah, money is important, but once you get past a certain point of income, then it's sort of, it's just extras at that point. Like as long as you've got your baseline covered, and then once you start realizing that, and you're just like, okay, like I pay all my bills, my family is secure, like I can buy stuff as I need it. Like if I need to save a little, I can buy a new TV every year or something like that. Like once you get past that point, and you've got a mortgage and all that sort of stuff, you're looking at the extra as in like, okay, why am I climbing this ladder for the job that I hate just to get more extra at that point? And it's like that extra, like it really eats away at you after a while, and you're just kind of looking at it like, what the hell do I want to do with my life? And then that question, once that's in your head, then it never leaves, basically. Like it's kind of hard to get rid of that. And I think, which isn't necessarily a bad thing either. It comes with its own like drives and its own passion and stuff as well. There's a lot of people that break into the games industry much later on in life because of that. Yeah. Like they realized, like one of my favorite memories was like some of the first places I worked at. Like I met a guy who was in his 50s, and I asked him like, okay, like how long you been in the games industry? And he was like, 3 years. I was like, 3 years? Like, oh, cool. Like, what did you do before? Were you in like movie industry or like graphics design or something? He said like, no, I was a lawyer. Hated it. Wanted to join games. I was like, what? So you would just... It's like, yeah, I was sick of being a lawyer, so I always played video games. I always wanted to make them. I just decided to train myself. I spent 5 years training up, and then I broke in. And it's just like, okay. And that perspective just completely changed everything. Cause it was like, the real, like this whole concept of like too late sort of thing. Like it's just, it's a myth. It's an absolute myth. You'd be amazed how many people are in the games industry that are ex-military. Amazed. So many of them. Like people that are working on Rainbow Six Siege, there's a bunch of military people. My manager on Rainbow Six Extraction, he was a tank driver in the Canadian Army. And it's just like, you find out this stuff and you're like, what the hell? Like, where was that bridge that, like, I want to know about that moment where you were like, you know what? Tanks aren't great anymore. I kind of want to make video games. Like, what made that, like, I want to, like, this is a part of that, right? Like, you're trying to fund yourself to sort of cross that bridge now, which is, there's nothing but admiration for you, man. As long as you do it smart and you do it well, then there's only so many bad points I can come up with.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, I think I'm focusing on the right thing. So production of the game has like ground to a halt because what I've been spending my time on is making a press kit so I can let press people know that I'm on this journey and this is like how far I've got. So, the idea is that I'm attacking it from all angles. So several funding sources, getting my name out there as much as possible. I'm going to be talking to some streamers I know and some people that make YouTube videos and things like that. I'm going to be putting more content out there. And just going through these processes of like doing like grants funding. I'm not going to approach publishers until later on because it will depend on how good I am at actually creating and curating my own sort of fan base. And I am fully aware that I could be terrible at that and not make any fan base, but I could get further along with the development, in which case that's a perfect opportunity for me to approach publishers to go, hey, I'm terrible at this, what do they call it, community management type stuff. I need some help with it because it's not a skill or at least a time constraint that I can work with. So yeah, I've got a plan, I've got a budget, and that's just given me this whole new like perspective on things. Like it was getting a bit drudging, it was getting a bit not boring, it was just getting a bit mundane, and it just felt like it wasn't going anywhere.
Stationary.
The milestones were insignificant because they didn't have any consequence or outcome. Like I could have just started to go, oh, I'm just going to do all the songs first, and I could have just started making songs, or I could have just finished on the level design, but I stopped halfway through just because I got bored of it, So the level design stopped at halfway through because that's just a okay place to catch up. But now I've got a plan with marketing and budgeting and approaching people. They need something playable, and they need something. If they play the first few levels and they're highly polished, and then it gets less and less polished as you play through, people will get hooked in the right places where they get hooked, which is at the beginning. They understand what the game is about by midway through, And then as the game sort of gets worse and worse as you play on, with it just visually looking worse and worse, not mechanically, they'll hopefully will get the idea of what the game's about and what it could be. And that is something that I can work towards. So now I've got an aim and a goal and an outcome for these milestones. So once I've got that polish up for those first few levels, then I can start taking screenshots, because I've got a reason to take screenshots, because it's to drive these goals that I've got. And then I can start taking videos, and then I can start editing a trailer. And so having these end goals and end results that I'm after has given me focus. So now I know that I need to make sure these textures A, B, and C are done first, because there's a reason to make them be done first. So and that's actually helped me be more productive quicker. So it's great all round. So next time, so great advice for anyone, if they're in a situation where they're just doing a side gig, make it as if it's not a side gig. Like, focus on a prototype that you can approach people first. Then if that doesn't go anywhere, focus on making a vertical slice that you can approach people with next. And then if that doesn't work, then focus on making enough elements what you need to get a trailer done. So it's going to show all the mechanics. Well, there's enough mechanics as you want to give away in a trailer in any case.
Sure, you don't want to overdo it. Otherwise, there'll be no point in making the game if everyone knows.
You don't want to show the endings. Like, and here's the beginning, here's the middle, and here's the end. That's the game. Like, yeah. You want to tease people, certainly, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. So yeah, that just by having that focus has really helped me. And unironically, the game is called Focus Find.
I was going to say, do you want to find some focus there, Chris?
Yeah,
no, it's, I absolutely agree. And I think this is, like, we've had this conversation before, especially on our Solo Dev Roundtable. You can go and check that out. It's on this channel if you are interested. And if you're listening to this on the audio podcast, then go and check out the Polygon Forest YouTube channel. We've got a devlog channel there, which is, a devlog playlist, which is with me, Chris, and Sam. We sort of go through our indie games and we sort of discuss these things in higher detail. But yeah, we've sort of spoken about the whole, how important it is to stick to game studio sort of mindset, even as a solo dev. And this aids to that quite well, which is the whole aspect of like building a prototype and then building a KOM or MVP or vertical slice, whatever the hell you want to call it, which is going to be a very clean, polished version. And with that slice, that thing in particular, because after you've done that, you then go into green light and then you're into production on a game. And then it gets released and then it's post-launch stuff. But on the vertical slice sort of MVP thing, because it's sort of like highly polished and it feels like a game, that's the thing that you can use to then go to publishers, then go to investors, then go to Kickstarter or Indiegogo or wherever you're going. You can use that as the main driver to sort of prove the reason why like they can invest in you, because you've already made something and like this is what the game is going to be and this is what you're investing in. Without that, it's just words and fluff, and and that very much depends on your salesmanship at that point. But like if you've got a game already, like if you've got the slice, which you have, Chris, then that sort of speaks for itself, which is great, because then you don't have to rely on like worrying about salesmanship and stuff. Because even if you completely fumble the pitch or whatever, like if they play the game and that's like, like you said some things in the pitch which I didn't really like quite understand, or I didn't really agree that was the right direction to go with or anything like that. However, the game that he's got and me playing it is great. Like I love
volumes.
This. Right. Yeah. So that sort of like it bears most of the weight for a pitch like that for publishers. So yeah, it's really important that people, like if you are an indie developer and you're listening to this, stick to proper milestones, which is your prototype and then going into vertical slices and then going into production. If you keep those things properly separate and you understand what they all are, then you'll be on the road to success, no problem, especially if you want to do this as a job and you're actually pushing forward. But if you dive straight into production, start making levels straight away, which a lot of people fall into that trap because they don't have the experience, they don't realize and all that sort of stuff. Totally understandable. Yeah. It's part of the learning curve. If you do that, then you'll never have that vertical slice to pitch it, because you'll always have a half-built thing all the way through, and you'll never have anything to show, and you'll never, like, you can show stuff, obviously, but like it's always going to look like a broken mess, and it's never going to look like the final thing. But if you work on that slice, then you've got that pocket of this is what it's going to be. and that's what you
And
can show.
I've been there. There's a reason why that happens. It's
We all
human
have.
nature. We
have.
want to do what we like to do and what we find fun, and we want to avoid or put off the things that we don't find fun or find a bit difficult or challenging or would take more time.
Absolutely.
So if we do the fun, easy, quick thing, yeah, we're going to do that because there's no consequence either way. If we do the hard thing first, it's the same end result if you're just doing it on the side gig, because it's all got to get done eventually, so it doesn't really matter when you start doing it. But yeah, if you want money to come into it at any stage, then yeah, it's best to do it how
I think
how it's supposed to be done.
That probably comes from, and you're absolutely right, I think where it comes from is that you get comfortable with a certain thing. Like if you're making a game and you learn something, like, okay, I've learned how to make my first level. Choose that as an example. You learn how to make your first level, and then you're like, okay, I know how to make a level now, so I'm going to make it the second level. Then you get comfortable with making levels. So what you end up doing is just focusing on making levels, and that's it.
Yeah.
So you make level. But really, like in the background, like your inventory is just like being ignored, which sort of interacts with all of these things. And then you get to the end of making all your levels, like, okay, and then I go back to the beginning and then start making on the second thing. And then you're going through every single level and then doing it all over again, which is just absolutely tiring. And just like, and especially if it's something that you don't really enjoy. Because you will have those things in development as well. Like, this isn't all like sunshine and rainbows, unfortunately. Like, I hate code and UI. Despise it. Like, it's one of the worst things in games development. Like, it's super boring. It's like, oh god, another button. You know what I mean? And like, like the mouse doesn't like highlight it.
That's why coders are paid so well, because it's
very mundane stuff. Yeah, it can be very mundane. Like, and you get the fun stuff as well, like the character controllers, like getting your character to do dodge rolls and stuff. Like, you figure that out. It's great. It's a load of fun. But like, I don't like. But there's other people that love like code and UI. They think it's amazing. Like, it's very straightforward. It's compartmentalized. They can think about it, like put all the theory behind it and do it properly and have a great time with it. I'm just not one of them type of people.
Yeah.
However, like if I ignored that all the way through and then it got to a point like now I've got like a whole section where I need to like make UI for the entire game, that might have broken me. Sort of thing.
Well, if you've got a prototype that you're going to be showing anyone, doesn't matter if it's investors, doesn't matter if it's just your friend and they just don't come around and play your game, like play your actual computer.
Yeah.
You need UI for them to be able to like start playing the game.
Exactly.
So it's a minimum requirement, unfortunately, for playability.
Yeah, the goal is like an MVP, because when you're making a prototype, it's very much just like separate systems that are all like broken using like other assets from different games and stuff like that, and you're just basically trying to get stuff to work, and you're like, okay, I've got all my systems working, my character's moving around, it's doing the stuff that it needs to do, this is what the game is probably going to be. And if anyone played that prototype, you would have to sit down with them and really baby them through it, because they've got like no context of anything really. There's no story in it, there's no, like you have to explain, like this is the buttons, you have to do this, and if you go over there, like I know it doesn't look like anything yet, but it is this thing, and like having that conversation just like hinders the experience. Whereas with a vertical slice, you're very much the thing that you're going to be using to like try and get the game funded. The goal is to finish that slice and be able to give someone a controller and not say a word and just sit there and watch them. If you can get to that point and they can pick up the control and be like, oh yeah, I know what's up. Okay, I've got to go over there. Oh, I've got to go and do this. If you can get that, you've nailed it. Like, you are almost there, And that's the goal. Like, that's the difference between prototype and a vertical slice. It's, apart from vertical slices, are usually a lot more polished. But the main goal is to be able to put a controller in someone's hand and not even say a word. And we have those sort of tests like internally at like at companies, like at Ubisoft. We have like game tester tests where we have two types of tests. It's a vocal test, an explanation test, or a blind test. And the blind tests are really fascinating, because we literally bring gamers in off the street, not off the street, but like they're vetted and all that sort of stuff. We put them into a booth and they're like, oh, you're going to be playing an action adventure game today. Here's the controller. They don't know the IP, they don't know the game, they don't know anything. Like when we were like, I remember watching the blind test to Watch Dogs Legion, and it was just fascinating. Like people sat there being like, oh yeah, this it feels like Assassin's Creed a little bit, but it's modern day. It's like and it's like a British guy and stuff, and like going through the sort of the underground of the Houses of Parliament in the beginning of Watch Dogs Legion, and then slowly coming to the realization, like, oh, it's Watch Dogs, oh, and it's set in London, oh, okay, like, oh, right, okay, now I get, and just them going through that blind test of like okay, can you figure out the new mechanics in the game and how you actually fight and the stealth and all of that sort of stuff without saying a word to them, without telling them the controllers, without telling them like what the setting is, like what they need to do, their objectives. And like that was highly important. That experience stuck with me, and it made me realize like, okay, that's something that we all have to strive to, because at some point or another, someone is going to pick up this controller and you're not going to be there with them. And if the game isn't usable, and the reason why I bring all of this up is because that, as a pitch to someone giving you funding for a game, for a Kickstarter, gamers, investors, publishers, anyone, if they can pick up the controller and understand exactly what your game is straight away, then you're gold. And I think based on what I've been seeing of your stuff, Chris, I think like you're mostly there anyway. So that's exciting. I think you're in the pocket now.
Yeah, well, for me, the aim is to try and keep in mind, like you're totally right with what you're saying, but also keep in mind that if they don't know what to do, as long as they're having fun figuring out what to do,
sure,
then that's fine. Or if you want them to be confused, and they are, then that's fine too. Like
this is the difficult thing, is like because at the end of the day we're making games which are like puzzles and stuff, right? And they are supposed to be challenging, or they're meant to engage the player in some way. So if you're trying to straddle that line of like, okay, I don't want to hold their hand, but at the same time they need to be able to know what they need to do to achieve like their goal within the game, like that question right there is the hardest thing about games development. Like,
and QA have one of the hardest jobs in the industry, because they've got to toe that line, but they've got to toe it with all the departments. Like so hats off to QA,
and we see the opposite as well, for that as well. Like if QA goes too far, like games can become a little bit too hand-holding.
Is like worse than frustration. Like
exactly.
I way prefer to like, well, where do I have to go? Because at least you've got less ludonarrative dissonance. Like if your character is in a place they've never been before, it stands to reason that they can't figure out where to go. But like if they've never been somewhere before and then your character says, oh, I've got to go up there, and you didn't know that, that's more ludonarrative dissonance, like more disconnection from the character. And we're talking about Horizon Forbidden West.
Yeah, of course. It's Horizon Forbidden West versus Elden Ring, right? Like that is the basic example. It's like, okay, being dropped in and just not knowing what the hell is going on. Like you're walking around in Elden Ring and picking up like eyeballs and like white meat flesh, and it's like, okay, what the hell does that do? And you're just like, you're completely confused. Whereas in Horizon Zero Dawn, like if you even see a plant, Aloy's like telling the history of it, she knows where it's from, she knows what it does, and she's going to tell you before you even pick the thing up, and you're just like, oh my god, shut up, sort of thing. And it's just the diametrical sort of, that's a good example, because like the best game is somewhere in the middle of those. Like they're both bad, you know.
Well, you say that, but like to like someone that doesn't play video games, Horizon is actually probably okay. Whereas hardcore, like I'm a melee hardcore, I beat this boss with melee only gamer, then Elden Ring is a great game. But
I'm not saying that bad things.
The majority of people are in the middle. That's why it's called the middle. Yeah, right. Middle of the road. And I'm certainly in the middle of the road. I mean, we'll get into it later, but I'm playing Elden Ring at the moment, and I do like the game. But there are moments where it's just like, I wish there was a little bit more information about certain things, and it's a very personal thing, I guess. It's very nuanced as well, and there's no real right answer. There's absolutely wrong answers, but there's no right answer, I guess. But yeah, fascinating. Yeah, I kind of went off topic there.
We did. I mean, no, it all pertains to the idea of like creating a good sort of MVP build or vertical slice to present to publishers or to someone that you're trying to get investment from. I think that's really, really important. It's something that you got to keep very, very mindful of when you're trying to do this sort of stuff. Not to say that you are having problems with this, Chris. I think you're quite far ahead with this. But like anyone listening to this that are indie developers that have these questions, that's what you should be striving for.
I think it's a testament to like teams with QA departments. Like I think it's from my experience with people playtesting it and people asking me questions and me like resisting the urge and me understanding the game inside out, like before I've even presented it to anyone. Whereas QA haven't gone through that, so they've got to take it on, understand it, and then get information from people. That's just going to be fundamentally more difficult. So QA with more than one person is like exponentially more difficult just because you've got like communication breakdown between people and departments and members of the public. Like if I'm playtesting with my friend, we know each other really, really well.
Yeah.
She'll ask me things and I know what she's actually saying. Whereas if she'd written it down in text and I'd read it on a form and then sent it off to someone else who's got to make a decision, it's like it just gets really, really
Gets lost in the shuffle.
complicated so much. So QA is just so hard. Like,
Absolutely.
I'm finding it really fun and interesting and challenging, but I'm just like, geez, if this was like more than one person and we'd have to like communicate between me and someone else rather than just my own brain, it'd be so hard. So yeah.
Indeed. Yeah. Speaking of QA, I guess we can move on and talk about. Unless was there anything else you wanted to mention about the Kickstarter thing?
No, because I'm not. If we're like a week later, I could go, "Hey, wish list my game on Steam." But I have got a Steam page, so if you're searching now, actually, because in the future, most people are going to see this in the future, not now. Yeah, search for my game, Focus Find, on Steam and wish list, and join the Patreon if you want. It'll be Acrylic Pixel. Search for that. It's going to be happening imminently. And yeah, if it's the kind of game you're into, then go for it. Oh yeah, I could talk about I could really go into the weeds of the reason why I came up with 3 different funding models on Patreon.
Sure, yeah,
we can do that for another week.
No, we can talk about that now. I prefer to talk about that anyway, just because I think it's a bit more unique than like what everyone else is covering. So, yeah.
So I've got 3 different funding models on Patreon. So, and the reason why I came up with these 3 numbers, 1, 3, and 9, is for very specific reasons. So I did a lot of research on successful indie game studios and successful people that are in the video games industry and what their Patreon looks like, and tried to basically replicate what the popular models were. There are some outliers that have larger teams that pump out lots of content constantly, like several games a year. They tend to have larger thresholds for their Patreon. So they'll have like $20 subscription. Their cheapest will be like $3 or $4, things like that. And they do really well because obviously their average works out to be, $4 or $5 $4 or £5 a month. The most successful ones where it seems to be more just singular people tends to be the lower end of the spectrum. So Patreon actively tries you not to go for £1 or $1 subscription. But what I found is the majority of subscribers are actually subscribed to the smaller amount, and actually equates to more people be willing to subscribe because it's like £1 or £2 or $1 or $2. That's less of a commitment than say like a cup of coffee, like £3 or £5. So my theory was to replicate the smaller indie devs that have more success, like more numbers, and a lower threshold for a Patreon subscription. My idea is like, I'm not trying to get rich. I'm not trying to make money. Well, I am, but what's more important for me, at least in this game, is to build a following and build a community, build a portfolio of people, and do that community management stuff. So the bar has to be very low because I'm starting from 0. So even if it changes later on, at least now I need to just get the numbers in to get some buzz going, because that's going to help me look more investable to investors.
Sure,
and to grants and things.
I guess the point to that is consistency is key. Something I can't stress enough. Like it's interesting because my wife has a Patreon page as well, like for the business that she runs, and the thing which I was hammering into her when she first started hers, and it's the same for absolutely anyone else. If anyone ever starts like this sort of marketing drive, a long-term marketing drive anyway, consistency is key. If you put out something once a week, make sure you put it out every single week, because the algorithm will notice that, and people will notice it as well. Not just just more exposure for you to get kicked up on the search engines or whatever like that. That stuff aside, people will notice. Like if you're just putting out content like once a week, they're just like, okay, there's always stuff coming. Like I'm always seeing stuff. That's important. So that's all I would say. Like if you do start Patreon, just keep people updated like every few days. If you're dedicated to making devlogs on YouTube, make sure they are every every couple of weeks to a month, and make sure that every single month at least, and just keep that ball rolling constantly. Like, it doesn't really matter about the amount of content you do, it's just more about the consistency. It's very, very important.
Little and often.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a good advice. And yeah, luckily that's what I had in mind. Oh, nice mute. For the audio listeners, Vin did a very successful sneeze on mute. That he was trying not to draw attention to.
Well, I'm glad that you did, Chris. So now everyone knows. Yeah.
Where was I? Yeah, that's what I had in my head in any case.
Yeah.
It's going to be little and often. I want to get the community engaged. The larger studios can sometimes be a monthly sort of update, a monthly log. But the fact that they're releasing games so often, the community seems to be self-sustaining and understand that they're focusing on making good quality games, whereas I need to build a community. And it's kind of going to take almost half of the dev time. So even if everything goes well and I get the number I need to start doing this full time, like half my time is going to be spent on putting content out to build the community, and half the time is going to be like trying to get funding, and then like the other half is going to be actually doing development of the game. So it's kind of weird because on one hand I'll be having all this extra time to spend on the game, but I'm only probably going to actually spend half of that time actually making the game, which is why you can see why if you get more people coming on board, there's a reason why being a solo indie dev is hard, and that's why, because it's hard to do everything. It's hard to wear all the hats all the time.
Sure.
And yeah, the more successful you get, the more easier it is to hire people as well. So that's definitely on the cards, but I've got a contingency whether or not it does end up with just being me, then I can work with, £1, £3, and £9 a month. I can work with that.
Sure.
I think that's a good split.
Yeah, a good example, I guess, is call it Destiny. I remember. So Destiny's budget was around 100 million. I think it was maybe a little bit more than that, maybe 125 million. 50% of that budget went into marketing. Literally, like straight up, like half of it. And that's how much like time and effort and energy you have to sort of put in to build up a base to actually eventually want to buy the game, because you're building up the tension and the precipice
and
of
the
like
hype.
Release and the hype. So like when it comes out, like all of those people that have sort of been engaged along that journey buy it. Yeah. And it's we've got to do that on a much smaller scale, obviously. But instead of
percentages are still across the board, like
without a doubt,
you could argue that a solo indie dev that spent 60 to 70% of their time building a community, and that would have more of a benefit than a AAA studio spending that percentage. Like,
sure, because it's more personalized as well. That's another thing.
Yeah. So it's going to mean a change of focus. So initially the development's going to go down if I'm doing full-time work. So it's going to slow down. But I'm re-energized and I'm refocused and I've got a plan and I'm happy and I'm like really excited. I don't know whether or not I've got some sort of mania, because I shouldn't be this excited about doing something that's, I'm not going to be making millions overnight. Like, I know it's still going to be tough. I know what I need to do. And I'm not going to be like eating steak every night, but I'm also not going to be eating like rice and beans every night. I'm going to be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah, mate, and that's a good sort of pocket to be in as well. You don't want to. You don't want to aim for eating the steaks every night for sort of thing, because like it's not going to happen. So
it would take longer to get there. Like, and the hard work should pay off for that to happen. Yeah, I'm still very early on in my journey, so it's really exciting. But yeah, if it takes off real quick, like if I get a few sort of your tweet things that happen where they blew up, then. Sure. It's just weird, isn't it? It's one of those situations, like your tweet for the zombie game, Long Gone. If that happened a few months later, if you had like a vertical slice, that would be really cool, like in terms of your situation.
I mean, in retrospect, I probably shouldn't have shared anything. I should have just held it off until I had a vertical slice, because then if it did take off, I mean, retrospect is a wonderful thing. And I obviously wouldn't change anything. Like, I'm still thankful that like it got the attention that it got. But what I probably should have done is like held off until I did have a vertical slice. Had that, showed it, people would have responded to that. It blow up in the same way. And then at that time, while the iron was hot, I could have been like hey, publishers, all the publishers that were like contacting me and asking me like, hey, do you have a build that's playable? Actually, yes. And I have a pitch deck. Let's call a meeting next week. I could have had that ball rolling.
Here's the press kit. Yeah.
So like I could have been smart about that, but like I honestly just was not expecting anyone to really care about that game, because nobody did care about the game for a long time. Like there was a good sort of 6 months period where I was just continuously updating my Twitter page, and just a few likes here and there from random people, the people that I knew personally, and they were just like, yeah, this looks cool, man, keep going, sort of thing. And I'm just like, yeah, this is probably just going to be another dead indie game, which, you know, like I'm probably never going to finish, but we'll see how it goes. And then suddenly just one of them explode, and it's like, okay, now this could be a thing. And it's like that, like it sort of shifts your mindset to, instead of it just being a side project hobby, to like, okay, how can I sort of transition? That's exactly what you're going through right now. How can I transition to make this like financially viable, so I can actually finish this thing and build it so people can play it and enjoy it? It's
kind of so it's kind of a good thing that didn't happen to me at that stage, because now I want it to happen like in 2 weeks' time, really.
Sure. And now you've just got to worry about like if it will happen, sort of thing, and like which is something that you can build towards either way. Like it's much easier to build up than it is to build back, almost. So you're definitely going away around it the better way.
The other good thing is I'm in a place with my life where I'm fine. I'm okay if it never takes off. Like that's okay. Like,
right.
I'm in a good place. So it really is. It's feeling like a win-win situation. Like the worst case scenario is it just takes longer and I don't do it full time. But I've been doing that for like most of my career anyway.
Sure. Yeah.
But I've only been in the situation where I had a computer and the time to spend doing it. So it's just happenstance, situation, budget, life situation.
Yeah, I mean, there are absolutely like times in people's lives where they have to take a risk almost, and that's. But the thing about this, and the thing about indie games in general, I guess, is like a lot of people don't really need to take that much risk. Like the only thing that they have to really waste and burn is time. That's it.
Sure.
Like there's really no reason for people to waste money on indie games, like making them, I mean. Which it's always fascinating to me, like if people are making indie games and they're quote unquote broke, it's like, okay, why don't you just get a part-time job and just keep yourself afloat while you're making it? And like if that still is enough, get a full-time job and then just stick to weekends making it. Yes, it will take longer, again, time, not money. Like you're burning through your time, but you're still not like unstable financially. When it comes to studio work, like there can be a lot more risk. Like my first gig that I ever took was a significant dip in pay from my day job, but I took the risk and it paid off eventually. But when it comes to indie games, like there's really no reason for anyone to take a hit on any of that stuff anyway. So it's sort of, as long as you play it smart, man, like there's no real, like even if you lost your job tomorrow, you wouldn't switch to being indie full time. Like you would find a new job and continue on making the indie stuff on the side. And it's people that make that mistake. They're like, oh, okay, like, well, I've lost my job because I'm not really putting time into it anymore. I'm just working on my indie game too much.
This is going to work.
Right. It's fate. Like this was meant to be and stuff like that. Praise the sun, you know, and it's just like, no, that's not what this means. It means that you're neglecting your job because you're focusing too much on your indie game. And you've lost your job because of it. Therefore, you need to find a new job and carry on with your indie game. That's the like you have to just keep smart about it and be logical about it and really think about it properly, because at the end of the day, if you have got other responsibilities, they come first and they should always come first. So it's exactly your point. Like each individual's perspective and situation is going to be different. Like some people can afford to take a part-time job because they might be living with their parents or their partner might be able to support them, and they might have a partner that's cool to support them. And you can literally afford to take a dip in your payment. Like you went from a higher paid job to a less paid job. I looked at building up a portfolio to be a narrative designer, and I wanted to get into narrative design. It's something I still would love to do one day. And you know, maybe I'm in a situation where I can go part-time with a narrative job, for example, or work for like 6 months at a time doing a narrative gig and then come back to doing indie game stuff. With me, my situation, I did a budget for how much I can afford to live this year. And again, the inflation was a big part of that. And then I came to the conclusion that I literally cannot afford to get into a narrative design job this year or probably next year, because I would have to take a junior role and it's just not sustainable. Like
I just literally wouldn't have enough income to support myself. So it almost just was it sounds really bad, but it was almost like a weight off my shoulders. It was almost like, oh, there's literally one road left. Everything is pointing towards doing this indie game thing. So it was almost like I had these options, and then every happenstance and situational things happened, and there's literally one path for me. And it just so happens it's a path that I'm loving being on already. Like, I had a blast setting up a Patreon page. I had a blast like researching and learning what to put in a dev kit, like a press pack, like for like journalists. It's just so much fun because it's like another string to my bow, another thing to learn. And that's me in a nutshell. Like, I love learning new stuff. So as soon as stuff gets stale, I want to change it up.
Yeah.
And again, another reason why like indie games is great, because every game is different, and so the skills you're going to be learning are different. Like, I'm not one of these indie devs that's like, I make pixel games. Like, I make pixel RPGs and I just churn them out. Like, if you can do that, brilliant, because you'll hone your craft and you can make something better, and you can build upon something, and you can like be the best pixel art RPG person. Whereas me, like, no, I'm like,
I honestly think that's like the greatest thing about indie games, though, more than anything, is that you're constantly like, you have the opportunity to do something different. I think that's the draw for most people, is that, okay, I've made one game which is a pixel art RPG. Now I'm going to switch over to making a 3D game, and just having that ability to be able to do that without like the publisher overlord saying, no, make another Call of Duty, sort of thing.
But you're good at FPSs. Stick to what you know. Yeah.
So like, and just having that freedom of being able to jump around, because you ask any dev that's like, would you prefer to work on a sequel or a new IP? 9 times out of 10, I'm like, I want to make a new IP, because I don't want to make this thing over and over again. But then the bonuses start coming in, like, but the money's really good, sort of thing. So it's a very hit and miss thing. But like, normally you see after a second game, if they're asked about the third game, there's kind of like, I really wish we were working on something else right now. And that's when it starts making it. That's where indie development really comes into to play, because you really do just have that freedom of, I'm just going to completely switch this up. Like, you go and look at games like Hyperlight Drifter, and then you look at Solar Ash. Very similar sort of art styles, but completely different formats. Like, one's pixel art, RPG, like an action adventure game. Then the other one is a complete 3D sort of half platformer adventure game. Vastly different. So it's like, you can do a similar thing. Same thing with Death's Door and Titan Souls. Very, very different games. But yeah, just having that freedom is never a bad thing in an indie game. That's the best thing about indie development more than anything, is that no one can tell you not to do, almost. So
yeah, and the worst thing you can do is stumble across something that you're really passionate about, but there's just no audience for.
Right.
But to be honest, the chances of you stumbling across the greatest game in the world and it failing for other reasons are just as high. So you might as there's no risk. And also, equally true, you can come up with a generic, some would say boring game, but because you just hit the magical jackpot on the algorithm, you could still have a hit. Like, we were talking about Angry Birds, weren't we, before on the pre-show? Yeah. Angry Birds is probably not the best game that developer came up with. It was like the 46th?
Yeah, 46th, 47th? I can't remember. It was up there. There was a lot.
Yeah. So they did 47 games, and they all failed. Angry Birds is probably not their best game. Like, they just, the algorithm gods shined upon them, and that became a hit. Like, people are not tuned in to like pigs and birds being angry. Like, those concepts aren't inherent to human nature that it's a hit. Like, it wasn't, they stumbled across what everyone likes. It is pigs and birds. Yes, why did no one see it before? It's not that. It was just the algorithms of
quite at the right time.
Of circumstance.
Yeah, and the opposite can happen as well. That, like, we use Angry Birds as an example, but look at what's Among Us. It's a great example. Game literally came out like 3 years ago. Came out 3 years ago, crickets. No one cared. And they literally didn't change it. They were halfway through making the sequel because they believed in it. They were halfway through making Among Us 2 because they were so invested in it. And they're like, yeah, the second one's going to take off. Like, the first one was good, but we're going to make the second one even better. And then suddenly 2 years in, for some reason, a couple of YouTubers picked it up. The algorithm kicked in, and then it obviously exploded, became this massive phenomenon. They cancelled Among Us 2, and they're like, okay, we need to go back to Among Us 1 and polish this up and fix it so it's actually like it's ready for prime time, like it's sort of taken off. So yeah,
that's a great advice as well. Like, if you've got a game and it tanks, if you've got it in you to still get it on other platforms, you might as well, because one of those platforms could pick up, and every time you put it on a new platform, there's another opportunity for like marketing or investment or like journalists to pick it up, because it's another thing you're putting out there into the ether. Absolutely. Basically.
Yeah.
So that's another piece of advice which I've stumbled across by doing all this research, is like, don't worry if it tanks. Like, don't start on your next game straight away, because it might not be bad, because people just go, oh, it didn't do well, therefore it's bad.
Yeah, like week one sales are bad, therefore game is bad. Like, that's a bad sort of like conclusion to come to a lot of the time, because like these things do take off after the fact. Like, it can, if the game goes on sale or something, or if it explodes through other means, then you can definitely reap the benefits further down the line. By all means, you can like start in your next game straight away, like if you think that it's tanked. But the important thing is that you don't give up on the first game, and still market it, and you still like reach out to people like, hey, this is a game I made a year ago, hasn't really taken off. I was just wondering if you want to try it out on the YouTube channel, blah blah blah, etc. etc. And they're like, cool, yeah, this is exactly what I'm into. I'm gonna review this, and then they review it on their channel, explodes, let people start buying it. It just gains traction, word of mouth, and then suddenly you're just there looking at the first game like, where the hell were you a year ago, sort of thing. And it could have been, and it's just stuff which, it's immensely important that you just keep focus on like the business sense of this as well a lot of the time. But very, very wild.
So I've kind of rattled on there. How long have we been doing that now? Is that coming up to now? Have we even got time to talk about Activision Blizzard?
Yeah, we should probably skip over that. Yeah, I mean, we can brush over them real quick. Like, we'll take an extra 10 minutes or something, but we won't go into any in-depth sort of conversation about it, I guess. But I kind of want to talk about the Kickstarting indie game stuff more anyway. But yeah, what's this? What's this I hear about Activision Blizzard? Like, what's the deal over there? What's going on with all the abuses and all that sort of stuff?
Well, unsurprisingly, The Guardian has gone with the whole frat boy culture headline again, which is not. What's happening is it is from what studio is it again? So there was a stage walkout in December from Raven.
Raven Softwares.
Raven Softwares, which is a part of Activision Blizzard, and that has subsequently led to a workers' union being formed. It isn't actually official yet, but they've had like a video put out about the fact that they're going to be creating a union. How difficult that will actually be still remains to be seen, because the headline is that it's totally unique. It's the first of its kind in the video games industry. Like, unions just don't exist. Yeah. And the video goes into some detail about why the union should probably exist, really, and it's about time. Like, the fact that there hasn't been, at least in their opinion, no perceived benefits or changes that's happened, and some of these stories that have been shared, it's like, eesh, yes, there should be a union. We won't go into detail about like what's literally happened, but for me, my major takeaway from learning about it was, I'm just surprised that half the practices of what people were complaining about are they're terrible, they're horrible, but they're actually legal in America.
Sure.
And it's just like, wow, this wouldn't fly anywhere else except America, but yet that's not illegal in America. So it's not like practices that you'd want to go into or want to do, but it's like common human decency. Half the stuff, like in terms of conditions, we're not talking about any abuse, like the conditions that some of the people have to work in.
I mean, it's like it's something that people are aware of it, but it's just, we only look at this and it's kind of like the general ignorance of people in the West in general, but we sort of look everything through the filter of the West, and we consider like, okay, if you're in quote unquote the West, then you should adhere to the same laws all the way around in the West, quote unquote. But if we look at how people are, companies like Foxconn in China, where they're working on like making games consoles and iPhones and stuff like that, right? Like the story came out like within the past decade of like Foxconn employees literally throwing themselves off the top of the roof and killing themselves to the point that they had to put suicide nets on the side of the building. That's how bad that company was. Pretty terrible. But however, like the people in the West, we just like, oh, that's in the East. That's a different problem, right? We sort of forget like there's actually a lot of different laws between the Western countries, such as Canada and England and America, for example, have very different laws in terms of how they treat their employees. Like recently in Canada, there has been a law passed about the right to disconnect, which is basically a law to say, okay, it's kind of a soft harassment if you're contacting people outside of work hours and you're expecting them to reply, then that's a really small, thin version of harassment, and that should be illegal. And it is illegal in Canada now, but it's not in America or in England yet. Probably will come along eventually. So the right to disconnect laws are very different between those different countries, and there's a lot of differences between the US and England as well. And just like culturally, even though we're very, very similar, we have very different mindsets behind what we accept in the workplace a lot of the time.
Yeah,
and
what's acceptable in the UK is not the same as what's acceptable in America.
Yeah, and vice versa. There's things all over the place. Like we sort of consider Japan to be a part of the Western Bloc sometimes as well, like depending on who you ask. But obviously Japan has got a lot of workplace issues which we would not let fly in the West at all. Like they wouldn't allow it in 5 minutes. But it's just it's just people's mindsets are very, very tuned, like to speak to that anyway. But yeah.
So I hope this is the start I hope this can turn the key forward and get things moving and get some change.
Right.
Because, I mean, we've obviously got to wait for the lawsuits with the Activision Blizzard stuff, because you just can't speed that stuff up. So however much we'd want there to be changes implemented, like because it's going through the lawsuits across multiple countries, there's just limitations about changes that you can implement in sooner or later, especially if it comes down to prosecutions and stuff. So
sure,
we've got into that situation and we just need to see that through. But there's lots of change and stuff that can happen in the background as well that aren't directly related to the lawsuit stuff. That funnily enough, is probably the frat boy culture stuff, which is less significant, obviously.
Yeah, it's. I really hate that they keep using that catchphrase because it's clickbait basically. That's what they're using it for. And I wish they would actually focus in on the issues, which is to do with the fact that people are being harassed, or they're not getting represented properly, or they're not getting the right compensation, all that sort of stuff, which I think unionization for some of these companies would probably absolutely fix that, but it comes with its own problems. There's unions don't fix everything. People need to do their research on what a union actually does and what it entails, which, I mean, I don't really have an opinion on them either way, if I'm blunt, and I'm in the games industry. The only opinion which I have about unions is how annoying it is when non-games developers are talking about games developers and how they should unionize. That annoys the hell out of me. Jason Schreier annoys the crap out of me when he does this. There's a lot of journalists out there that have this sort of shtick where they need to push for unionization of the video games industry and how amazing it'll be and how much it'll fix everything. When in actual fact, it absolutely would fix some companies, but it won't fix all of them. If anything, it could be a detriment to a lot of companies as well. So we need to tread lightly with this stuff, and more importantly, it very much needs to be up to the developers themselves. And in the case of Raven Software, it does look like that is the case. Raven Software employees have come out and they obviously expressed their intent to unionize now, on a half official basis. I don't think it's officially gone through yet, right? It's just the beginning.
I'm not sure what the laws are for it to be official.
Sure.
They might even come up with some stumbling blocks legally, they might not literally be able to because of the laws in the country or something. But so again, that might be a difficult, long, treacherous path that could be dragged out into the long grass potentially. Sure. Because I'm not familiar with those laws. But
yeah, I mean, the important thing is that they probably will be able to unionize. America has a pro sort of union outlook on a lot of stuff, like workers unions and stuff like that, so I'm sure they'll be able to figure it out. And
Microsoft's official response was something along the lines of they're not against it if they can pull it together, sort of thing.
I was about to say in a statement to Axios, the spokesperson for Microsoft answered, Microsoft will not stand in the way if Activision Blizzard recognizes a union. Microsoft respects Activision Blizzard's employees' right to choose whether they are represented by a labor organization, and we will honor those decisions. So, I mean, the fact that Microsoft is sort of like now that they're officially going to own Blizzard Activision, they're just like, yeah, if they want to unionize, that's 100% up to them. That's not anything to do with us. And I respect the fact that they did that, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that every single company in the world should unionize, because that's, yeah, it's very granular. It depends on the culture, it depends on the company, it depends on the country, it depends on the people, it depends on... there's so many factors in this. We cannot, like, we've got to avoid this blanket statement of all companies should unionize, because that's not...
Yeah, or the blanket statement of unions are good.
Yeah, even that. It's like, not all of them are good. Like, some of them are very, very bad. So we need to be wary of that, and they can stifle, like, industries as well. So
yeah.
It's, yeah. Not to...
But in this situation...
I'm not
I'm not surprised that... that is happening in that situation, and it sounds like that needs to happen because there hasn't been changes from what I've heard.
Sure. Yeah.
So that sounds like it's good news, a good news story for once.
Yeah, I would hope.
Good news, but from a bad situation. But
yeah, with this, like, the thing that is important about Raven Software, and the thing that I focused on more than anything, is the fact that they actually had a vote, and they voted to unionize. So therefore, there was a majority in the company that wanted to unionize, for the QA department anyway. I think it's just Raven QA. So that being the case, like, I respect that, and I completely support them in their endeavors when they're doing that. Like, the only thing that I would hope that wouldn't happen is that companies do it against the employees' will at any point. That's the only part which I have worries over, is that if the whole games industry unionizes, and there's certain companies that are just doing really well and they don't want to unionize, like, they should be able to give them that choice as well. But we'll see. I mean, this Raven Software thing, it's early days. When the union actually does go through and it starts happening, well, then they will absolutely be a test bed for the rest of the industry. So it's something that people are going to be watching and keeping an eye on, and we will too.
Yes,
indeed.
Yep, I think that's good enough. Time. How are we doing for time?
We're at about 1 hour 5, I think, altogether. But yeah, one thing I did want to cover just mention really quick, is that this week there's been a lot of talk around this, which is the PlayStation Spartacus subscription service, which is heavily leaked, and like, there's been a few people reporting on this. So Takashi Mochizuki at Bloomberg News sort of made note of this week. I think Jason Schreier is also on it now. God damn it, this guy. Yeah, so he's...
Your best friend?
God, I hate that. He's literally blocked me on Twitter. So, yeah, and I'm quite proud of that fact. Anyway, yeah, that pertains to the union discussion mainly. But, yeah, Mochizuki, like, he put out the story first anyway, but it's also been confirmed by Jeff Grubb over at GamesBeat or VentureBeat, depending on which part of the website you're in. They mentioned that Spartacus is going to get announced within the next week, basically. That they think it's going to happen like as soon as the fiscal year sort of ticks over. So around April 1st. And yeah, it's coming basically. So we don't know any details. We just know that it is coming. There's been leaks about what the service is actually going to be in the past, and it's probably more going to be a shift of their current services and sort of bowl them into one, so it's a bit more digestible for certain gamers. I don't think they're going to be, like, a lot of people are talking about Spartacus being the sort of rival to Xbox Game Pass, and I don't think that's realistic, really, because I don't think PlayStation can, to be blunt about it, I don't think they can afford a Game Pass service. They haven't got enough money to burn to put in day and date God of War, Ragnarok onto their service, stuff like that. They will absolutely put older games, like games that have been out for a year, that a bunch of people have already spent $70 on them, and then afterwards they're like, okay, now we'll put it onto the service after it's like dipped down to the point that we're not making profit on anymore. But I don't think it's going to be like a Game Pass sort of deal. It's going to be very much
AAA exclusive releases,
right?
Because they don't have to try to battle Xbox Game Pass. And it's just bad business sense in some respect to try and beat them at their own game. Like, they've got to try and it's this further separating of Xbox and PlayStation as being rivals and just moving more into their own niche areas. So they've just got different models, I think. I think, yeah, it's going to be like the old stuff will be cheaper. I think that's basically going to be the bottom line. And just a revamped PS Now.
Yeah, and to that point exactly, I think what this really is doing is just reformatting their current services that they've already got and then adding a couple of extra features, such as old PlayStation 1 games. If they can bring those back in some capacity, that'd be great. But I think the majority bulk... Yeah. I mean, they've already got cloud gaming in PlayStation Now, but I think the bulk of this move is that PlayStation Now and PlayStation Plus are going to merge, and that's the main thing that they're trying to do. And they're basically trying to get rid of PlayStation Now altogether and just merging those two services, keeping the same price for the most part, and then adding more tiers above that. So if you want the extras like the PlayStation 1 classics or like the more recent newer games, then you have to pay extra to get those. Much like Game Pass Ultimate and normal Game Pass as well. But
so it would be PlayStation Now and PlayStation Plus. So it would be PlayStation Plow.
Yeah, PlayStation Plow. Plowing through the competition.
Hey, we should be marketing company. PlayStation, if you need some marketing people.
I really shouldn't be marketing PlayStation.
I don't think they'd employ me.
I don't think they would employ me either. It'd just be there'll be a lot of eco remakes. That's all I can say.
Yeah, same here. So yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's tough. But yeah, I mean, it remains to be seen. We'll definitely probably be talking about Spartacus next week, especially if it does get announced. If it doesn't, then yeah, that'll be an interesting sort of thing as well, because there's a lot of people saying it's coming. Like it's within the next week. It should sort of be here, and I'm pretty sure it's going to drop as a PlayStation blog post or something, and it's going to have all the juicy details in that, because I think they're probably trying to do it on the sly, like between the heavier season, because there's probably going to be a lot of issues with this. People are going to be doing a lot of comparisons to Game Pass and realizing very, very quickly that it's not going to be as good as a value deal as what Game Pass is, because that's almost impossible to match without being a company the size of Microsoft. So it's going to be a rough couple of weeks for PlayStation, but I think once they get over the hump of that and they've fixed all of the services and they've fixed all the iron out any issues that they got with either UI or bugs or whatever, once they get over that hump, then they've got a good basis to sort of build from. So I think they should be all right, but I think they're going to have a rough week once they announce this, and I think that's probably why they're doing it now and not during E3 or something. They're not doing a massive blowout for this. They're trying to do it as subtly as possible while introducing these new services, and then they can sort of fix it by the time E3 comes around, and then they can really talk about it. But it's gonna be a little bit rough in the beginning, I think.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right there. Yeah, I'm nothing to contradict that opinion, but we'll see if we're right next week, I guess.
Yeah. And then we can say.
So you'll have to tune in next week and then see if we're got egg on our face.
Yep. We're probably not going to talk about what we've been playing this week, because we've been going a bit too long anyway. But yeah. The only thing I will say is, like last week, we obviously didn't have an episode because we had a devlog. I played Guardians of the Galaxy on Xbox through Game Pass, actually. Speaking of which, amazing game. Everyone should play it. It's free if you've got an Xbox. And you should probably play it even if you don't have an Xbox. Like, it's a really great little game. Like, I don't understand why more people weren't talking about this game, but you should go and check it out. Yeah. And
I'll download it, and then I'm going to turn off my Game Pass, because I'm not going to be playing anything new for several months.
Fair enough.
So I don't need to have that £10 coming out of my account every month.
You need to make games, not play them.
Yeah. Or I've got like a backlog that I can literally just cut it off. Like, I've got the I've got a backlog that I've got there sitting waiting on the actual Xbox, waiting to go. So don't need it.
Cool. Yeah, I've been playing Elden Ring this week. We'll talk about that more next week, though.
We'll get into that. Yeah, because there's some juicy stories we can go into. Yeah.
I mean, that's a long discussion. So yeah.
How juicy it gets.
Yeah, how juicy it gets. And it also depends how many eyeballs and other body parts I happen upon within the game, which I have no idea what they pertain to, but we'll talk about that next week. But anyway, everyone, thank you very much for joining us this week. If you did enjoy this episode, then please like, subscribe, comment, all this stupid usual stuff which every YouTuber says. Make sure you do it. You know how to do it. Like, push the buttons, all that sort of good stuff.
We appreciate it. Yeah, so we're nearly one for every every day of the year. We're really happy with our subscribers. So yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, a massive thank you to everyone that's joined us over the past year. And it's been great. Like we didn't know how long this was going to go for, but like the consistency has held up, and we've one a day for a year is pretty decent. So like we'll try and hit our next goal.
Take that.
Yeah, it's not bad. I mean, I knew we weren't going to like explode into 1 million subscribers or anything like that, but yeah, it's been nice like to see the steady like flow of sort of subscribers come in and like not leave as well, which is great as well. Like it's always just gone up. So that's very encouraging. So we really appreciate everyone tuning in.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So where can we find your stuff, Ben?
Yep, you can find me on Twitter. I am at Hillfort Games. My indie game is on there. The aforementioned Long Gone game, which I'm currently working on, is there. It's getting a bit of traction. It's getting stuff is moving. I'm going to be sharing more like cool visual stuff this month because now I've got all the boring UI stuff out of the way. I needed to get that done. All the fun stuff starts happening now, which I'm actually really excited about. Like it's going to be cool. But yeah, you can check it out on there if you do want to find me. I've also got an art station if you're into concept art, which is Vin Hill Art. You can find me on there. I just released some stuff for Rainbow Six Extraction, so all my concepts for that are on there. And yeah, that's about it. How about you, Chris? Where can people find you? So,
well, it's getting bigger now. It's getting bigger. So at Acrylic Pixel is my Twitter, which is where I spend most of my stuff and where I've got most of my audience. But also I have my own YouTube channel, Acrylic Pixel. You'll be able to wishlist on Steam. Acrylic Pixel is the studio name and Focus Find is the indie game I'm working on. I've got a Patreon, Acrylic Pixel, and I'll have a Discord, which I'm going to try and get the name Acrylic Pixel. Hopefully that's fine. I think I actually have my personal one, which is Acrylic Pixel. But yeah, it's all going to be coming very shortly, all the different social media. So whatever is your platform of choice, we can catch up there.
Yep. Cool. Very cool. Yeah, I look forward to it. Is your Steam page up and running right now, or is that something that's coming inbound like relatively soon?
I think it's up and running now, but I haven't checked it, so it's got to the point where there's nothing on it.
Okay.
But if you're listening to this or watching this, probably
retroactively, it's probably absolutely
Google. It's worth a Google.
And to the kids in 2026, make sure you comment down below. That'll be hilarious. 2026, you can go and check out Chris's game, which is out now. It's probably on sale. Enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah, probably. Or in the near future, if Harrison's watching this and he's 30, it's like, oh yeah.
It's like, oh my god, this is when Dad was embarrassing himself trying to be an indie dev. It's like back in my day. Yeah, I can imagine.
He's talking about Patreon. Lol.
He said lol.
Although that'd be retro. Yeah, and he'll say that ironically because it'd be like super retro.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
We're rambling as usual.
Indeed. Anyway, yeah, thank you very much, guys, for joining us, and we will catch you next week. Until then.
Bye-bye.
Ta-ta.